We are live. Welcome to the Comics Cube, everyone. We are live with Karl Kesel. And as you can tell from his glasses and the shirt he's wearing,
I didn't notice.
we are talking about the return of Impossible Jones.
She's back.
It's called Impossible to Love, The Return of Impossible Jones. The Kickstarter is up, impossiblekickstarter.com. The link is down below, but really it's impossiblekickstarter.com, guys. You can type it in. You have actually already met your goal, so the book will definitely be published. So
Oh
we're
yeah,
talking about
definitely.
stretch goals here.
Yeah.
Impossible Jones, a thief who pretends to be a superhero. Who is your take on Plastic Man and decidedly not Harley Quinn?
Yeah. Well, there's a little Harley Quinn in there, but her attitude is actually, I think, much more Catwoman-y. She's a little more calculating than Harley Quinn is. Harley just goes with the flow and Imp tries to have a plan, at least she's got a goal in mind.
She
So,
very much has a friend who is very much in the vein of Harley Quinn.
well, very much. But that was, I mean, that was so we would show how not like Harley Quinn Impossible Jones was. But that sort of character is a very fun character, the Harley Quinn archetype, It's
Very fun.
hard to just put that character aside. That was a case, I mean, really, when we introduced, and we're speaking about a character called Holly Days.
Mm-hmm.
And when we introduced Holly, obviously the name is very similar to Harley Quinn, Holly Days. Um, but it was the first 6 pages of the very first Impossible Jones story, and the whole idea was we'll show how different these characters are. Then we'll forget about Holly Days, but she keeps coming back. It's a character who keeps reinserting herself. It's a case of those. That's one of those cases where the characters tell you what's going to happen. Really.
I feel like that is built in to a Harley Quinn type character.
Yeah, she does kind of insinuate herself.
Impossible to Love. So far you've had one graphic novel, which is Grin and Gritty. This is the beginning of Impossible Jones,
Right. That's her origin.
and that's her origin story. And you've established a city, the world she lives in, which is a full blown world. And
Yes.
then you had four team up books, which has
Hmm.
been collected in
I believe we
something that I got in the mail today.
today. That's
Today,
great. And
it's like,
I've
oh,
got,
great time.
yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, it's called Impossible Team Ups. You have your cast of characters right there. Um, what is Impossible to Love about?
Well, it starts our third arc, which I don't have a name for yet. But what happened in the book that we both were displaying is that there's a huge battle, and in the world of Impossible Jones, in the city she lives in, which is called New Hope City, there are very few heroes. I mean, it's really modeled a lot after the very early Marvel comics, where there were only half a dozen heroes running around New York. And I really like that idea of having a limited number of heroes and then just keep adding in villains. And, that just makes our heroes underdogs because there's a lot more people for them to fight than there is of them. Anyways, in that book, um, all the heroes are in one way or another incapacitated. And Impossible Jones ends up being the last woman standing. And knowing that this is not good for the city, the mayor deputizes her to make her an official law enforcement uh, official. And so now she's a thief pretending to be a hero who is now has full access to the law enforcement police department. And what she's looking for now is, now that she's on the inside, she's looking for one last score that will set her up for life. She figures this is her one big chance. So she doesn't want to know what that's going to be. She's just keeping her eyes and ears open. And that's kind of the setup where we begin Impossible to Love. And Impossible to Love, she's kind of, getting a feel for what it's like to be, you know, on the police force, so to speak. She doesn't have a uniform or anything, but she's deputized. And she runs into a character called Demolition, who had been introduced earlier. He's the man with the atomic touch. He's got antimatter hands, and whatever he touches blows up. But he's able to turn that power off. He's got little wristbands that he taps together, and then a little thin layer of force field covers his fingers so he can touch things. All right. Um, and he's I guess the closest equivalent I would give him is Sandman in the Marvel Universe when Sandman was kind of a good guy, kind of a bad guy. I mean, I don't think Demolition is necessarily evil, but he's kind of fed up with the system, and he does not have a lot of use for authority, which he actually has in common with Impossible Jones. And
He doesn't know that.
but he doesn't know that. See, that's the problem. Is they meet, and Impossible Jones and him they click, and their paths start crossing during the course of the story, and they start really liking each other. But back at the police precinct, when Demolition is mentioned, detective there says, you really should bring him in the next time you see him because he's a wanted criminal. And so that's the position we put Harley, or look what I just said. That's the position.
Oh,
That's the
oh.
position we put Impossible Jones in, where she's starting to have feelings for this guy, but in order to maintain her cover, she's got to bring him in.
And speaking of Harley,
I guess we were.
um, co- conspicuous on that cover is also Holidays.
Oh well, Holly is, yeah. Oh, on the cover of the book. Yeah,
On the
unfortunately, I don't
cover
have
of the
something
book
I could show.
of Impossible to Love.
Impossible to
So
love. Yeah.
for those who aren't on impossiblekickstarter.com, and what are you waiting for? Go over to impossiblekickstarter.com. The cover is a throwback to a nice little 50s romance cover where Impossible Jones is lamenting the fact that she can never be loved. And then through the window, we see Demolition flirting with Holidays.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I will say I think the story itself is pretty much a typical Impossible Jones story, very action-packed, a lot of her sassy comments and stuff like that. But I couldn't resist, and David was very nice to follow along, doing a throwback cover like that. I mean, just it's fun to do it's always fun to do a cover like that that references earlier eras of comics, and it I mean, personally. I was reading Supergirl in the 70s when they kind of were doing the same thing where the covers of Supergirl comics had like her coming into a room and someone was kissing a biker guy and she's like, "Oh no, someone is kissing my boy," And, or there's a great one where Supergirl and Zatanna are fighting over a Yeti, like, "No, he's mine. No, he's mine." It's like the most bizarre idea for a romance superhero comic ever. And I just love those covers, though. I think they're just fantastic. I honestly do not remember the stories, but I remember those covers.
Those are great because, like, so I've read my share of 50s romance comics, for example, right? And I don't think a lot of the stories are anything to write home about, but those covers are awesome.
I know. It's just everything is so dramatic, melodramatic, obviously. Yeah. So yes,
Um,
we did a our homage to that for the cover.
yeah, that's great. So I remember you telling me before that after Grin and Gritty, the first one, you were gonna go right to the next solo Impossible Jones story, and then you decided to go to the team ups because you got a windfall from the use of King Shark in the Suicide Squad.
That did free me up. Yes.
So how is this different from what you would have done if the Impossible team ups didn't happen?
It's impossible to say. I mean, really, I mean, what were we going to do? I had a big story involved in place that we actually cannibalized some of the story parts for the team up stories. So, but it's impossible for me to say what that story would have actually been. I mean, I had a basic idea, but I mean, when we were doing the team up stories, I thought we would do these little self-contained team up stories just as a way to explore Imp's world a little more, establish, do some world building, show different corners of it, maybe introduce a few other supporting characters, really ground her, give her a much better grounding in this fictional city. And as I started writing it, and I think I told you this at one point. I always knew parts 3 and 4 were connected.
Yeah.
And when I was writing part 2, I suddenly realized, oh, I can do something in part 2 that will connect it to part 3s and 4. And so then I sat there and I said, is there something I could do? And by then part one was done. But I said, is there some way I can look at part one and connect it to? And all of a sudden I saw a way to connect all the dots. So what
And boy,
started as
did you. Yeah.
and so what started as four little self-contained stories grew exponentially. I mean, the first story was still longer than a regular comic. It was like 30 pages, but our last issue was like what 60 pages long or
Yeah.
something like that. It was huge. It was a huge finale.
It was
And
really big. I remember it being thicker than everything else.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, when we added in all of the pinups and stuff, it was an 80-page book.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, in that collection you have, we added 12 more pages of epilogue into that last part.
Oh, that's
So,
great.
so I mean, that became, I mean, the story worked without the epilogues, but the epilogues tie up some loose ends that kind of, well, were loose ends.
So I'm gonna point out to everyone, this is 4 issues.
Yeah, it's
That's
200
four
and
issues.
some
Yeah.
pages. Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I mean,
very worth it's worth the size, right? Like it's
yeah.
worth the
And
price to pay.
Impossible to Love is oversized too. I believe it's 40, the main story is 42 pages long. The main story. That's all written, and David is drawing like page 30 right now. He's almost, three-quarters of the way through it at this point.
Is it
So
standalone?
what?
Is it a standalone story?
Yeah, it is very much a standalone. Of course, it says prologue, and it is a prologue because it's setting things in place that we can play off of for the rest of this arc and build on
Okay.
for. But I mean, by itself, it's a standalone story. It's got a beginning, middle, and end. Yes.
What is the backup story, which I assume is a stretch goal?
Well, we got to see. We got to see what the backup story is going to be. There will be a stretch goal of a backup story, and everyone loves a good even Steven backup story. And even Steven, we did do backup stories in all of the individual team up books, but we did not collect it in the collected edition. Those even Steven stories are not in those because our plan is probably early next year, maybe after Impossible to Love, collect those even Steven stories into a book, do new even Steven stories that would finish off some of the things we started in those backups, and do an even Steven book, standalone graphic novel of his own, a hardcover book.
That's
So
pretty incredible. That's pretty incredible because you created Even Steven, who, so for those not in the know, Even Steven is like a mix of Mr. A and this
like the
I'm gonna
Phantom
say the Phantom
Stranger.
Stranger.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's a really apt analogy there. Yeah.
I was about to say the Spectre.
Well, similar.
Yeah. And he just kind of took off, and you did backups of possible Even Steven origins
Yeah.
throughout the whole Impossible to Love. No, sorry, the Impossible Team
Possible
Up
team up
stretch.
story.
Some issues had two
Yeah.
Even Steven origins, and he was not part of the main story. Well, he was part of the main story, but he wasn't part of the covers, right? He wasn't like it
No,
wasn't Impossible Jones and Even Steven. There wasn't one of those books.
no.
What do you think it is about him?
I have no idea. I mean, and maybe you can never tell when these sort of things are going to take off. I can tell you what I think is an interesting story is around the corner from us, not far away, lives the principal to the elementary school that my daughter goes to. Very nice guy named Michael Diltz. And he's been a big supporter. He and his wife, Hallie, have been big supporters of Impossible Jones since they found out about it. And they did get this latest collection, the hardcover book, and I could hand deliver it to them. They live like 4 houses away. And Hallie was telling me we dog sit for them. So she brings over their dog and he plays with our dog most weekdays, most weekdays. So we see her almost every day. And she came over one day and she said, she goes, Michael was up last night reading your Impossible Jones book and he wouldn't go to bed. He was having, and he stopped at one point and he goes, tell Karl he has to do more stories about this character. And it was even Steven. And this is from a guy who doesn't read comics. This is from a guy who's just reading this book and even Steven jumped out at him. And I don't know what it is.
That's amazing. That's such an amazing story. I don't. So, would you imagine yourself like? I know you're doing Impossible Jones. Would you imagine yourself at some point like making just a full-on Even Steven spinoff?
I don't think, I don't know. I hesitate to do that only because I think part of even Steven's appeal is he's an enigma. And the more you learn about him, the less interesting he's going to become. So how, I mean, so how do you do stories about a character that you can't delve into, that a character you can't expand on? You know what I mean? Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think he's a really great supporting character.
Would you say, because we were talking earlier about how you never expected to really use Holly Days again, and now we're talking about how you didn't really expect even Steven to get the reception that he's getting. Which character would you say has had a bigger fan reaction?
Oh, even Steven, without a doubt. Yeah. Yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah.
Even Steven is your Harley Quinn.
Yeah, I guess so. Luckily, my Harley Quinn is not my Harley Quinn. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of people who enjoy Holly Days too. I mean, she's the sexy gal. Everyone loves sexy little gals, and she's kind of ditzy, but as we learn, she's not as ditzy as she appears.
No, yeah.
So,
I don't think we ever talked about this in any of our previous interviews, but at some point in Impossible Team Up, Impossible Jones, David changed Impossible Jones's costume.
uh-huh.
What was the impetus for that?
What was the impetus for that?
Impetus for that.
Um, well, what it came down to was, there were two things that David wanted to address. One was in the original design, which David and I had put together. She had boots that came up mid thigh, and it always bothered. David said it always bothered her that her gloves only came up to the middle of her forearms, but her boots did not match. They should. He really felt her boots should just be mid calf boots. And also, he wanted to change her costume just so that if you had just the silhouette of Impossible Jones, there would be something that would identify it as her. Now she's got a very distinctive hairstyle. There is that. But he gave her like these little flared shoulder cuffs and even the bands around her waist area where her costume ends before her legs begin. There are thick black bands there, and he flared those out too. Just little touches that have little things that break up the silhouette of the character. And really that's what it came down to. He wanted something that made the character just a little more distinctive in a silhouette.
Having a distinctive silhouette is the Batman factor, the Batman principle.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
However, that leads into my next question, which is throughout the entirety of Impossible Jones so far, we have seen Impossible Jones's silhouette, aka her shadow,
Uh,
uh, not actually being her shadow. It makes faces, it reacts in different ways.
mhm.
We have had no real explanation as to why that is. Will we get one in this book?
I will say when you say this book, do you mean Impossible to Love?
Impossible to love.
I will say we advance that story quite a bit. Um, so we see the shadow do something we haven't seen it do before, and I certainly plan. From the beginning, I would say I contacted David early on, and I said, and she's got a shadow that can like make faces and move independent of the light and stuff like that. And he said, why? Why does she have it? Because it did seem very unconnected to the rest of her abilities. And I said, I don't know why, but it feels right to me. And like the next day, I wrote him an email and I said, I know the story behind the shadow. I know what's going on. And quite honestly, I think it's a great bit that we will reveal over the course of our next arc. We set up,
Okay.
once again, Impossible to Love is setting up pieces, putting pieces in place. And we definitely put a piece in place for the shadow story.
Once again, we are talking to Karl Kesel. We're talking about Impossible Jones, Impossible to Love. The Kickstarter is up on impossiblekickstarter.com. I will say that as somebody who lives in the Philippines, and shipping is very expensive from the US to the Philippines, there are only a handful of Kickstarters that I back every time, and Impossible Jones has been one of them. I missed the first one because I didn't know it was around back then, but I eventually got that book.
Yeah.
So uh, I have to commend you for your discipline and your restraint as a writer, for knowing what's up with that shadow and not letting anyone in on it. Like, I think I would lose my mind. I had to keep
Uh,
that to myself for that long.
David knows. David knows, and I think Ron Randall knows the story too, because Ron and I have like a brain trust for Kickstarters, and we always talk to each other about what we're up to. And I read his Trekker outlines and give him feedback. He reads my Impossible Jones outlines, gives me feedback. I mean, this is kind of how we operate without an editor. It's not. It's always nice to have those fresh eyes. You know what I mean? Someone who isn't inside your head who can say, well, what's going on here, Carl? That doesn't make sense,
Mm,
you know. And David does that too. Quite honestly, we were just did. David always does thumbnails, little thumbnails for his pages before he pencils them. And there was a sequence, and I sent David the script. This is an Impossible to Love. Sent him the script, which I thought was very, very solid. And he said, "This sequence over here, I think when we get to it, we might have to rework it." And then David did his thumbnails of that sequence, and I looked at it and I said, "Damn, that doesn't work." So, so David was right. He's got a great eye too, and we reworked 2 pages of the story and it's much better now. But I mean, that's why it's great to work with collaborators like David and to have a great friend like Ron in my back pocket because they look at it with fresh eyes and we trust each other enough that we can say this doesn't work. And with Ron, there's sometimes where I go, well, it works for me. I mean, that's one of the things you have with a creator-owned project is I get to say what happens. I have final say. I have final cut. Now with David and me, I've learned when you're working with someone and you come up with a point where someone says, I would like to do A, and you're over here and you go, well, I would rather do B. And my experience is whoever feels strongest about it should get their way.
okay.
And that has worked really, really well for me in the past. Every time, when I can tell David is really set on something, I go, okay, I'm not as passionate about this particular point as David is. Let's do it David's way. And this has worked out, I think, really well.
Can you give me an example of a time when something like that happened, either with David or with any of your previous collaborators?
Well, I mean, I guess, the only thing that comes to mind right now is the shadow story, where I told David, I said, she's got the shadow and it moves independent of light and it makes faces. And he goes, I don't like that idea. I mean, those were not his exact words, but he was very resistant. And I said, no, no, this is a good idea. And David said, okay, we'll see where it goes. And David, once, like I said, the next day when I realized how the pieces fit and told David said, now I'm on board. But I mean that was a case where I was going, no, David, this is a really good idea. We got to include it. And so that's an example. I can't think of any other examples right now, none whatsoever. But I
That's
mean, I've
great.
worked I've worked this way with you know, Tom Grumman on Superboy. I've done this for a long time, and
Yeah.
it seems to work out really well.
Yeah, the name that was coming to my mind was Tom Grimmett, but
Yeah.
just because I'm such a big fan of Triangle Arrow Superman. Uh, yeah, so Impossible Jones. So once again, this came today. And for those people who are wondering what you get when you back an Impossible Jones Kickstarter, you get things like this. Let me just, yeah, you know,
And that's
uh,
hard to see. Oh, there we go. Now we can see it.
there we go. So you get these little chibis. Are these the ones by Giancarlo Bernal?
Yes, they are. Filipino artist.
Filipino artist who, if you cross 27K, you are
I think
currently
we're
at
just above.
25,145.
Right.
If you cross 27,000, we will get equivalents of this for Impossible to Love.
Yes.
Um, this book, Impossible Team Up, we put it out around the same time as Valentine's.
Right.
So therefore, there was a little nice Valentine's card that we can use. You get some pins. So here
Captain
is Captain
Lightning.
Lightning and Polecat,
Polecat.
and also some stickers.
Well,
So,
that is a tattoo. That's a temporary tattoo.
oh, this is temporizer too. There you
Yeah,
go.
because it matches my real tattoo.
That's so great.
It's the exact same size and everything.
That's so great.
Yeah.
And also, and I backed Impossible Team Up in the first 48 hours. So
Yeah.
that's
For
it's
the
a
people
little
who
too
did.
late. It's a little too late to be getting this now. You're only backing it now.
But there's other cool things. I mean, right now, because we crossed over Halloween, well, actually, not everyone now will get the Halloween card, but the early backers who were there on Halloween, there's a Holly Days dressed as Halloween card. So, but I mean, we've got some pinups that are being done that'll probably be prints for stretch goal prints for this book. Um, and we got if we get to the point, I'll probably do another enamel pin. Um, we've got the stickers by Jean. You say Jean? How do you say it? Jean?
I believe it would be pronounced Giancarlo. Like
Jean? Like
Gian,
Jean?
like you pronounce the whole thing,
Okay,
Giancarlo.
Giancarlo. Oh,
Yeah,
Giancarlo Bernal. Okay.
yeah.
He's a great guy. Have you ever met him?
I have not, no.
Okay. I just didn't,
But we're
it's like,
friends on Facebook.
yeah. Well, I'm friends with him on Facebook too. He's just, I mean, and not to like derail his conversation, but I mean, he does these great little chibi drawings, but his regular art, where he's a serious artist, is astounding. It is just astounding work.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So uh, the Philippines has a long history of great artists.
I'm sure they do.
Alex Nino, for example.
Yes.
So you mentioned a print. There is, in fact, a 41st century Impossible
Oh,
Jones watercolor print by David Hahn, which looks incredible.
yeah, David. I have I actually have the original for that somewhere here. David sent it to me. Not for me to keep. We'll eventually offer it probably as a special add-on for one person. But yeah, I mean, he did this huge, it's really quite a huge watercolor of Impossible Jones, kind of as a Barbarella character. I mean, because that's what he was going, yeah, I'll do a watercolor of her. What should I do? And I said, maybe, if we're going to do a series of these over this arc, let's see if we can come up with a theme. And I said, maybe it's Impossible Jones from different eras. And the two that I suggested was maybe Barbarella Impossible Jones or maybe Swingin' 60s Impossible Jones. Those are my two suggestions. And David goes, I love both of those. So probably the next book we'll see a Swingin' 60s Impossible Jones from David.
How many how many books is this art going to take?
But that is uncertain at this point. I'm guessing
Really?
I'm guessing four. I'm guessing four. I mean, I know where it's going, but sometimes you just don't know how long the drive is going to be. You don't know if you're going to see a really interesting, oh, this side road looks really interesting. And then, oh, there's a castle. Look, I just don't know. I know where we're going and I know basic beats, but there could it could take a while. I mean, the last book took what, a couple of years for us to put together. And so I'm sure this last book, all the parts will take a couple of years to put together.
What can you tell us about this art that's starting from Impossible to Love?
Well, I can tell you one of the things is, this is, I don't think we've really played with this enough. I mean, the thing that we're going to really play with here is how everything, Impossible Jones's whole life is built on lies in many ways. I mean, even though she and Holly Days are friends, Holly doesn't know that Imp is pretending to be a hero, you know? So even with her very best friend, someone she would call her best friend, the relationship is built on lies. And those have to come home to roost at some point. And this story uh, uh, will certainly climax with all of this stuff coming to a head one way or another. And it's where everything comes together for Imp, or it all crashes and burns for her. That's what this whole arc is about.
Will we see addressed, and I'm forgetting his name, her search for her boyfriend who has been
Her
missing since.
her boyfriend should be returning, yes.
Okay.
Especially once she starts having feelings for someone else.
Oh,
That's that's why we want that's why we want the boyfriend to return.
of course. What's his name?
Jimmy, we don't know his
Jimmy.
last name. I don't think we know his last name, but his name is Jimmy. And Jimmy has his own little power, and he got knocked through a portal the last time we saw him. We don't know where he went, but Jimmy will be returning. Yes.
Carl, I've always associated you with really fun comics, even from the 80s when you were inking over John Byrne on things like Legends. And, as I mentioned, Triangle Era Superman, you created the most fun Superman variant, which is Superboy. And I do think that something like Impossible Jones is the type of comic that uh, will could be used by people in the foreseeable future.
I am with you on that feeling personally. I
Uh,
remember, not to make a direct comparison here, but I remember I think it was like Harrison Ford or something after 9/11 said, "Well, I'm going to be making comedies for a while." You know what I mean?
yeah,
So, and I'm not
yeah.
sure it was Harrison Ford, but it was someone like that who said, no, I think it was Jack Nicholson who said that. Well, going to make comedies for a while now. And because he felt that's what the world in America needed at that point. And from my standpoint, I think any day the world could use more Impossible Jones. But I do think it would be a very suitable comic for the foreseeable future. Yeah.
And I've said this to you before. I do think that Impossible Jones simultaneously feels classic and modern. A
Uh-huh.
huge part of it feeling classic is it's the tone, the feel. A huge part of it feeling modern is the sheer diversity of your cast.
Well, thank you. Yeah, yeah. Well, we do what we can do, and yeah. So thank you.
In Impossible to Love, you had a murderer's row of variant cover artists that included Dan Jurgens, Bill Sienkiewicz, Stuart Immonen, Jeff Smith, for
Adam
and
Hughes. We had Adam
Adam
Hughes,
Hughes.
Bill
Yeah,
Sienkiewicz,
you had a fold out by Art Adams in this
Art
book
Adams
as
folder.
well.
Yeah.
Uh, you have three variant covers for this one. One is a black and white Kickstarter exclusive of the regular cover. Do you want to tell the people watching who the other two variant cover artists are because they are great?
Yeah, well, we got Terry Dodson has agreed to do a cover. He did do an Impossible Jones pinup that's in the very first graphic novel, the first hardcover. But I told him, I said, this time I want a cover. I wanted Terry Dodson to cover. And you should be drawing it now. I mean, that he was busy last month, but he said I'll get to it early November. So it should be done, and I should be able to post it before this campaign is done. And Terry, he's a good pal. He's a great artist, great artist.
A Harley
Um,
Quinn artist.
he was on
Yeah,
Harley Quinn when I was writing it. Yeah, he's done Wonder Woman. He's done a few
yeah.
books. Yeah, and Adventure Man. If no one has seen Adventure Man, that's a really amazing book that he's working on with Matt Fraction. But I'm looking forward to seeing what Terry does. He's going to do a great alternate cover. And Terry also, I believe Terry is also going to approach it from a Love Comics cover approach. He seemed to think that would be a lot of fun to do. So, and then the second alternate cover was I approached Ty Templeton, and I think Ty is one of those guys that probably isn't as well known as he should be, but he's an amazing artist, great guy, and his stuff has a certain whimsy to it, which I think is applicable to Impossible Jones, and he's a real smart guy,
Yeah, he is.
and I believe Ty, I've seen his roughs, and I believe he's drawing it right now. He is doing an infinity cover. He's going to do an infinity cover for Impossible Jones.
What does that mean?
Oh, I thought I can educate you. An infinity cover is one of those covers where there's some portion of the cover that is the cover reduced down on that. So it's like if someone's reading a book and the cover of the book is the cover of the comic, and then on the cover of the book is a book with the cover, and it's an infinity. Theoretically, that image goes to infinity. And I mentioned it in passing to Ty. I said, I wouldn't mind like an infinity cover. He said, I'd love to do an infinity cover. So Ty is going to do a infinity cover for Impossible Jones, and he had two sketches. And he said, which one? He gave me like three ideas, and I picked out two of them, and I said those two are really good, and I like both of them for different reasons. So do one of them and surprise me. So I don't
That's
know
great.
which Infinity cover he's going to do.
Why do you think Ty isn't as well known as he should be? Because I
I don't
agree with
know.
you. He is incredible.
He's an incredible artist. And I don't know. I don't know. I can't even begin to explain it. I mean, it's like, you know, Luis Garcia Lopez should be like royalty in comics. And I mean, he's certainly treated like royalty, but I mean, there are a lot of people who don't know his work at all. He's an artist's artist first. And I think in some ways Ty falls into that same category
Yeah.
of being like an artist's artist,
Well,
you
I
know.
I would say people do know Jose's work. They just
I
don't
think
know
he's
who he
getting more and
is.
more recognition. Yeah.
Well, I just mean because like if you buy a DC Comics pencil case or a lunchbox,
Well, yes, they know
right?
his art. They just, they don't necessarily know his
They
name.
don't. Yeah, they don't know that it's him.
Yeah.
I will go to my grave saying that the way people talk about, and I don't mean to disparage the name I'm going to name, the way people talk about Jim Lee is the way people should talk about Jose Luis Garcia
Oh
Lopez.
yeah, exactly. I don't even think Jim Lee would argue with that.
Yeah, great. I didn't want to piss off Jim. Your stretch goals, you had your first stretch goal was spot gloss
Right.
on the cover. Your second one is going to be these chibi stickers. If you
One
had
chibi sticker. One we will get to other ones later. Yes.
okay,
The
this
Impossible Jones chibi sticker is up right now.
the possible chibi sticker. If you hit 27K, what else can you tell us about future stretch goals?
Well, I can tell you what I want to do is that alternate cover we are talking about, which is kind of a black and white version of the regular cover,
Mhm.
except it has spot magenta in the background. I want
Okay,
that to be foil. I want that to be magenta foil. And
great.
I need extra money to do that though. So that'll be a stretch goal. That'll be a stretch goal. And maybe the next stretch goal. I mean, other than that, we've got I'd love to add a back matter section where we show sketches, David's thumbnails for some of the pages. Um, I think the sequence I was describing before where I wrote a sequence. David said, I think we might have to work on the sequence. He sent me the thumbnails. I said, yeah, you're right. We have to work on the sequence. And then that would make a really good process thing in the book. To show how something was changed for the better. So a back matter section would be good. We have do I have two different people working on pinups right now? So I have pinups that I would like to add to the book or do as mini prints.
Can you
Uh,
tell us who those pinups are?
well, I know. See, I think I have two of them out there, but I'm forgetting one person's name. One of the pinups that's being worked on is by Craig Rousseau. So I'm really looking forward to his stuff. I like Craig. I know Craig really well, and I love his work. And he's going to squeeze it in between drawing Herculoids.
It's so great whenever I see the pinup section, like for example on Grin and Gritty, because while I can see, let's say Aaron Lopresti, not was it Aaron Lopresti?
He
Like
was
somebody
there,
with a more realistic type style
right?
than David, like where I know it's probably not appropriate for a full length Impossible Jones story, but it is nice to see
Uh-huh.
the renditions for a page.
Yeah. That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah. So, well, Aaron's a great artist and a very, very nice guy. I like him a lot. Um, but yeah, and I know I've talked to someone else about doing a pinup or print, and I cannot right now remember. So I very much apologize if someone is watching this going, "Hey, it's me, Carl, and you're forgetting me." And I'm sorry, but I am. I'm forgetting.
If that someone is watching this, you can type your name in the live chat right there.
Okay.
And then also you mentioned a possible backup story.
Yeah, and we're gonna see now. Here's the thing is as I get older, I have more and more of a desire to do some stuff that I write in pencil and ink myself. I have to say this is becoming a real strong desire. Okay. But I love working on Impossible Jones. And we got a lot of stories we would like to tell. And so it's possible that the backup story might be by me and it might feature new characters that I want to get out there. Okay. And I got a lot of different ideas. I'm not sure which one I would do. I'm not sure which one would fit in a 6-page story. And I also don't know if I've got the time because, we really want to turn this book around and I'm very, very, very slow at penciling. So we might do instead another Even Stevens story, which will be very popular. So I'm trying to balance like this deep desire I have to write and draw my own work and do another Even Stevens story, which the people want. So, and maybe we can go to a point where we can do both. I mean, I have had two
I was
backup
gonna say,
stories. I have had two backup stories in the book before. So depending on how the Kickstarter goes, depending on how much money we can raise, maybe we can get to the point where we could do two backup stories.
I don't suppose you doing an Even Steven story is is in play here.
Well, I don't think so. Oh, and not because I don't like Even Steven, but because what I want to do is get some of my other ideas out there. You
Okay, I
know,
will not ask what those are.
I got too many ideas, you know, that's a problem in my life. I have so many ideas and not enough time to do a tenth of them. So I don't know which one I would go to. It really would almost probably be what I feel like that day.
I remember the first time I ever spoke to you and you mentioning that and I told you that I was surprised that you don't do pencils considering that you write in ink. And you told me that the main reason that you don't is because of John Toddleben.
Well, I don't know if I would lay it at his feet, but Toddleben was pretty amazing. Yeah, I mean that for most people that probably have not heard the story, I'll tell it real quick, is when I went to the Cubert school, and this is one of the very first days before we were even having classes. We were just like mulling about, finding our desks, getting used to the spot. And Toddleben had sat at his desk, and I did not know who John Toddleben was. And he took an 11 by 17 piece of paper, he took a pencil, and he just made a large S shape. That's all he did, and it was very large. It took up most of the page. And then he put it down and he picked up his brush and he just started inking. And he finished this astounding sea serpent. And not just a sea serpent, but a whole watery background for it and everything. And in a very short amount of time, if you ask me. And I mean, I really thought, I'm out of my league in this place. That's really what I thought.
That sounds like an incredible story, but I can believe it.
Yeah.
And I can believe it, yeah. So
So,
oh, is there anything else that you would like to talk about when it comes to Impossible Jones?
oh, I'm sure as soon as we finish, I'll think of it, but not right, right now I can't think of anything. I would love to have more people support Impossible Jones so we can get to do more things like these backups we were just talking about, like adding foil to one of the covers, which I think would look really cool.
Yeah.
Um, but we need more money, we need more backups for that. And quite honestly, I just want more people to read Impossible Jones. I mean, we kind of uh make these excuses to talk about the book really so we always have something new to talk about the book and so it's not always just the same thing that people are seeing online, but really what we're looking for, what Ron Randall is looking for, what I'm looking for, what Dean Haspiel, who is doing Chest Face, which is a book I recommend people look into. Chest Face, about a guy, a Kirby-esque monster whose chest is on his face, or his face is on his
Art
chest. His face is on his chest. He's a very
Arnim Zola?
very sort of character, except he's kind of a Kirby monster. You haven't heard of this, obviously.
I have not heard of this, but I know Dean Haspiel. Yeah.
And chest face. So his face is on his chest, no head, big hulking Kirby monster sort of guy, and he's trying to be a stand-up comedian. And
Sold.
it's a brilliant book. I've certainly backed it. And I don't know why I suddenly got onto that. But I mean, all of us, that's what I mean. All of us, what we're really looking for is to get our stuff in front of more people. We want it read by as many people as possible. And all these stretch goals, like I said, is just a way to keep the conversation going without saying the same thing over and over and over again. And maybe someone will say, yeah, I like enamel pins, so maybe I'll get this book. But what we're looking for is more readers. We want more readers because we believe in these books. We believe in these books. We believe that people like you, people like, you know, the principal around the corner from me. These people will enjoy these books if they get them and read them. And that's what we really want to do is I know it, I'm an entertainer. This is, and I want to, and you need an audience to entertain when you're an entertainer.
I do love Impossible Jones, and as you know, I am all for. Seriously hoping that Impossible Jones, somebody from Hollywood comes and talks to you about it.
Uh, if you know people, let them know. I know no one in Hollywood, so
Is your dream casting still Ursula Cabrero?
I still think she would be a great Impossible Jones. Yeah.
Yeah, like mine would be Tatiana Maslany.
Okay, I don't think I know her. I'd have to look her up. I'm
Orphan Black
Oh, well, she would be very good too. Yeah, yeah.
or She-Hulk.
Oh yeah, that's right. She was She-Hulk. I forgot.
She was. Uh, Thank you so much, Carl. This has been a great talk as usual. I'm looking forward to Impossible to Love. I backed it like within the first hour. You've already made your goal, your initial goal, so the book will definitely get published. There are 23 days left to go, and I think I will dive right into this.
Thank you. Well, please let me know what you think. So,
I can't wait to get to the extra stuff
yeah,
because
well,
there's so
most of
much
it's
extra
right at
stuff.
the end, right at the end, the last like right at the end of the fourth chapter. There's 12 pages of epilogues.
You know who would make a great variant artist if you get around to her? You might have thought about this. Elsa Charretier.
Oh, like she did do a pinup once that became a t-shirt.
It became a
No,
T-shirt.
she's another really great artist and who I
So
luckily
great.
latched onto before like all the really famous writers got a hold of her.
No, yeah, she's gotten so much bigger
Yeah.
since doing that pinup and grit and gritty. But
Yeah, and
she's
I think it was this
amazing.
pinup that really made her career.
Absolutely. When the book about her is written, that's
Yeah,
going to be the
they
first
will say
thing.
this is the turning point. This was the turning point.
Thank you so much, Carl.
Thank
Good
you for
luck with
having
the
me.
rest of the campaign and have a good rest of the day.
Yeah, I think it can only get better, right? Maybe it won't.
Okay,
I don't know. We'll see.
we'll see.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
We're off.
we are off.
Thank you.
Thank you
Well,
so
that was
much.
fun as always. I'm sorry that